Yo crew, welcome back to Ninja of the Seas. Today we're diving into episode 1124 of One Piece, and trust me, it's pure chaos. From Straw Hats planning an aerial escape to Kizaru finally making his move, Egghead is turning into a battlefield. The Vega force is ready, the barrier's up, and betrayals brewing. Let's break it all down. Usopp declared there was no chance they were escaping this island, but Luffy? He just smiled like it was any other day. With that fearless grin, he grabbed the Den Den Mashi and sprinted straight at York, declaring they'd be using her as their ticket out of there. Without hesitation, Luffy snatched the snail and shouted into it. "My name's Monkey D. Luffy, and I'm going to be king of the pirates." He made it clear they had teamed up with Dr. Vegapunk, and if the Navy wanted York to stay in one piece, they'd better back off. Meanwhile, York was bawling like she was in some soap opera, crying for someone to save her. The Marines started murmuring, beginning to realize that Straw Hat Luffy might actually be just as wild and dangerous as the rumors suggested. Vivi was stunned, especially after how hard she'd been defending him. The Gorosei, unfazed, asked which agents were still alive inside the lab. Just as Luffy began to answer, Robin slapped her hand over his mouth and hung up the call, scolding him for being reckless and handing intel over like it was a party flyer. But in Luffy's mind, that call was enough to rattle the Navy into backing off. Usopp told him to quit treating the Marines like rent-a-cops, and then Saturn chimed in with the cold logic of a true villain. He said there were only three things that needed protecting: York, the Punk records, Vegapunk's brain archive, and the power plant producing the Mother Flame. Everything else? Worthless. A report came in that Rob Lucci's squad was still on site, but Saturn dismissed it. He was already diving deep into villain monologue mode, muttering about humans being like cockroaches. No matter how many you squash, more keep crawling out. York, trying to reassert herself, reminded everyone she had a deal with the Gorosei. If anyone laid a finger on her, they'd nuke the island just like O'Hara. That set Nami off. She didn't hesitate. She slammed York with the force of a thunder god, furious that York dared to bring up O'Hara in front of Robin. York tried to bluff, threatening to tattle to the Gorosei, but Nami couldn't care less. Zoro tried to calm things down, saying York was unarmed, but they'd all forgotten the most dangerous thing about her: her mouth. Robin, meanwhile, was looking a lot better thanks to Chopper's medical skills. The little doctor lit up with joy from the praise, practically glowing. Vegapunk expressed his gratitude too, thankful Robin had saved him from York's trap. Chopper mentioned Usopp had helped hold off the Seraphim. Usopp tried to play it cool, but admitted he was actually just looking for Zoro and accidentally stumbled into the battle, only to get wrecked and saved by Zoro himself. Rob Lucci, dry as ever, told him to go lie down. Lilith, one of Vegapunk's satellites, was sobbing uncontrollably over the loss of Shaka, Pythagoras, and Edison. But Metalhead, aka Atlas, barked at her to toughen up. He was still standing. Usopp shouted quietly so he could hear what was going on in the basement. Down there, CP0 agents were calling out thank yous for the food the Straw Hats had given them. Some of their comrades told them to shut up. No need to broadcast gratitude to the enemy. All they wanted now was a way out. Anything to escape those terrifying Seraphim. Usopp asked if they'd be okay. Vegapunk reassured him they would. He trapped the Seraphim in special bubbles, made from the same material as the Mark III pacifistas. They could take an explosion and come out shiny. Plus, the bubbles were coated in sea stone. Minnie Mihawk was furious about being trapped in what he called glorified bubble wrap. S-Snake told him to chill. She hadn't even been ordered to vaporize anyone yet. Frankie thanked her for reversing his petrification. That surprised Vegapunk, since he never programmed her to do that. Turns out, S-Snake had done it because Luffy had asked her, blushing like crazy the entire time. Jinbei cracked up, saying she was just like the real Hancock. Nami chimed in that the weapon Lilith gave them was a lifesaver, especially when it came to saving Sanji by trapping S-Hark in a giant bubble. When Luffy tried to thank S-Snake personally, she nearly fainted, thinking he'd said I love you. Atlas attempted to reopen the barrier, but no luck. They were still sealed inside the island unless someone could disable the impenetrable wall. That's when York burst out laughing, mocking them. She'd locked the barrier with a passcode she never shared. According to her, it was her ultimate insurance policy, one tied directly to the world government. Lilith looked ready to blow her top and launch York into orbit, but York kept gloating, saying they'd never escape. Luffy realized that all the dramatics York just performed led to absolutely nothing. Usopp, half smug, reminded him this was expected. Of course the world government wasn't going to let them walk away. This wasn't a charity, it was One Piece. Elsewhere, Lucci was observing everything like a hawk in the shadows. 2 Vegapunk satellites were down, and the Straw Hats were still holding on. When Usopp asked what he was muttering about, Lucci brushed it off, pretending he was just thinking out loud. Classic spy tactic. Then Stussy arrived, cool and composed, delivering the bad news. They were completely surrounded. 100 warships, 30,000 marines, and one shiny, battle-ready Admiral Kizaru. Sanji, ever the gentleman, or simp, rushed in like a loyal golden retriever, offering Stussy some tea, though let's be honest, it wasn't just tea he was hoping to serve. Stussy teased Lucci, telling him not to get mad over one little bite. Honestly, who wouldn't want to be bitten by her? Vegapunk turned to Nami, asking to check the escape route. Using the log pose from their time in Wano, Nami confirmed it was pointing toward one place, Elbaf. That was all Luffy and Usopp needed to hear. "We're going to the land of giants!" they shouted, practically already packing their bags in excitement. Even Edison's rusty gears couldn't quite compute why Luffy and Usopp were bouncing like kids on sugar. Vegapunk, the original, reminded them that the Sunny was docked in the Leba phase, but with the entire island wrapped in a Navy blockade, using the port was out of the question. That left one option, the Vega Force, Vegapunk's giant robot, conveniently parked right next to the Sunny. The plan? Launch the Sunny clean over the Navy's ships. But there was a catch. The Vega Force couldn't fly beyond Egghead's limits. The second it hit open skies, it'd crash faster than a busted dendon. No sweat though. Frankie proudly declared that the Sunny could launch itself a full kilometer. Vegapunk nearly fainted when he learned the ship ran on cola. Cola-powered rockets? That was practically scientific poetry. So the mission was set. But to pull it off, they first had to bring down the island's barrier. And York? She wasn't budging on the passcode. Still grinning like she just won Villain of the Year, she held the code hostage. But the Straw Hats weren't about to take no for an answer. They got to work, digging into the system like a gang of cyber pirates trying to jailbreak a marine mainframe. Frankie was all in. No way he was missing a chance to show off his new bazooka to Lilith. Luffy and Bonnie were already suited up and ready to launch themselves into Elbaf's direction. With zero hesitation, they leapt off the lab. No parachutes, no backup plan, just trusting that the cloud floor below wouldn't turn them into pancakes. Classic Straw Hat behavior. They sprinted to relocate the Sunny to the rear of the island. Time was ticking, and once that barrier went down, they had to move fast. For Lilith, it was her first time ever leaving Egghead, and the excitement practically burst out of her. Luffy was kicking himself for not grabbing snacks, while Bonnie was in full hangry mode, saying they should have packed more pizza. Luffy shrugged it off, saying cheese was all they needed. Sanji could whip that into a gourmet meal in seconds. Bonnie blushed, calling him perfect, tough and a cook. Bonus points. Sure, she might be a bit young for Sanji's taste, but come on, we all know Sanji doesn't really care. That boy would simp through a firestorm. Luffy asked why she was suddenly in such a good mood. Bonnie said it was like a huge weight had lifted now that she wasn't out for Vegapunk's head anymore. Luffy grinned, glad to hear she'd stop crying every 5 minutes. Meanwhile, aboard the Marine fleet, Rob Lucci casually dropped some insider info into the comms like he was live-tweeting the whole thing. The Marine commander told him to update the entire fleet, and somehow, nobody questioned why a CP0 agent was texting like a high schooler during finals. Inside the Gorosei war room, Saturn was sipping tea when Kizaru popped in. Saturn asked if he heard the latest. Kizaru nodded. Straw Hat tried to play it off like he was running the show. But they both knew the truth. Bluff or not, the Navy still held the cards. Saturn then asked a logical question. Couldn't Kizaru just go through the barrier? After all, he's made of light. Kizaru said technically yes, but the barrier was guarded by his old pal Sentomaru. Saturn waved that off, saying to ignore him. But Kizaru shook his head. He wasn't about to throw hands with the guy who used to split cup noodles with him. Touching Sentomaru would be a death wish anyway. The sea beasts and 50 Mark III pacifistas would reduce the Navy fleet to fish food. Then Saturn asked if he at least knew where the Mother Flame power plant was. Kizaru smiled. Lucci had already sent everything they needed. That man's sneakiness was unmatched. Back on the deck, the Marines geared up like they were about to invade a Yonko's wedding. They called in the Rokushiki squad and started prepping to free the CP0 agents, who, to be honest, were having the chillest time on the island. One of them pointed out that their bullets were practically tickles to the pacifistas, so it was the sea beasts they had to worry about. Luffy was bouncing around on the cloud floor like a rubbery kid in a bounce house while Frankie yelled not to lose focus. They finally reached the Sunny, just in time. Then came the moment everyone felt, a shift in the air. Kizaru's eyes locked onto the island, and Sentomaru sensed it instantly. Flashback time. Sentomaru remembered the lessons he got from Borsalino as a kid. Uncle Kizaru, who used to be all smiles and silly jokes, now glowing like a solar flare, was here, and he wasn't playing. In a split second, Kizaru unleashed Yata no Kagami, bouncing light off surfaces like a god-tier pinball. Sentomaru smiled grimly. "Uncle's here," he muttered, and ordered the pacifistas to attack. Kizaru zipped in, radiant as ever, and Sentomaru stood tall. "My defense is the strongest in the world!" he roared. Their clash exploded with blinding force, lighting up Egghead like a firework finale. The entire island shook, Marines panicked, and even the Straw Hats felt it in their bones. Luffy paused mid-bounce. Someone strong had just entered the battlefield. And that's where the episode ends. Coming up in episode 1125, the will of two men collide, Kizaru versus Sentomaru. An all-out brawl between master and apprentice. Lasers, loyalty, and betrayal, it's all on the table. And you know Rob Lucci isn't just gonna sit back and sip tea. If you want the next breakdown, type One Piece 1124 in the comments to summon the YouTube gods and push this video to the grand line of the algorithm. Smash that like button, subscribe if you're vibing, and help us hit 20k before the year's out. And hey, don't miss the video on screen right now. It's hotter than Sanji's kitchen. I'm outta here. Peace.